Today, we're digging into the upT2D trial. This is a big one because it asks a really important question. For people who are managing both type 2 diabetes and obesity, could a higher dose of semaglutide be a game changer? All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to walk through the whole story of the trial, starting with, why even do this study? Then we'll look at how they designed it, what they found for weight loss, and of course for blood sugar. Then we'll get into the safety profile and wrap it all up with the clinical bottom line. So first things first, let's set the stage. Why did we even need to test a higher dose, especially for this particular group of patients, which, as we know, can be really tough to treat? And this quote really gets to the heart of it. The standard 2.4 milligram dose of semaglutide, it works great for a lot of people. But there was this group of patients with both type 2 diabetes and obesity who just weren't hitting their weight targets. So that created a really clear clinical question. What if we intensified the treatment? What if we went with a higher dose?
So, to get the answer to that question, researchers put together the upT2D trial. Let's take a look at exactly how they designed the study to get a clear answer.
And you can see this was a really robust trial design. We're talking 72 weeks, randomized, comparing 3 different groups: the new 7.2 milligram dose, the standard 2.4, and a placebo. And a key detail here, they had a 20-week dose escalation period to help patients get used to it, plus everyone got a lifestyle intervention.
Okay, so who was actually in this trial? Well, they enrolled 512 adults, and this table tells you a lot. The average person was about 56 years old, weighed over 110 kilos with a BMI of almost 39, and their HbA1c was sitting at 8.1%. This is a perfect snapshot of a real-world, challenging-to-treat patient. All right, we've got the setup. Now let's get straight to the good stuff, the headline results. What happened to their body weight? And here it is, the big number, using what's called the trial product estimate, which basically shows you the drug's effect if people stick with the treatment. The group on the 7.2 milligram dose saw an average body weight reduction of 14.1%. That is a huge number. This graph just brings that number to life. Look at the blue line. That's the 7.2 milligram group. You see the steep, steady drop in weight that just keeps going. And you can really see how it separates from both the standard dose and the placebo. And that gap just gets wider over the full 72 weeks. Averages are great, but they don't tell the whole story. So let's look at how many people hit those really significant weight loss milestones. In the high-dose group, more than 43% of patients lost 15% or more of their body weight. And get this, about 1 in every 10 people achieved a truly life-changing reduction of at least 25%. Incredible. Okay, weight loss is obviously a massive piece of the puzzle here. But for this specific group of patients, managing blood sugar is just as important. So, what was the impact on their HbA1c? Well, the glycemic results were just as impressive. Patients on the 7.2 milligram dose saw their HbA1c drop by an average of 1.9 percentage points. Remember, they were starting from that really high baseline of 8.1%.
And just like we saw with the weight loss, this graph shows a really fast and significant drop in hemoglobin A1c for that 7.2 milligram group. The improvement kicks in early, and most importantly, it holds steady for the entire 72 weeks of the trial.
And they achieved this powerful glycemic control safely. I mean, look at this. Nearly 3/4 of the patients on the high dose got to the ADA target of 6.5% or less. But here's the kicker. It happened without raising the risk of significant hypoglycemia. In fact, there were 0 severe episodes in either semaglutide group. That is a huge clinical win.
Okay, so we've seen some really powerful efficacy, but that always has to be balanced with safety and tolerability. So now let's take a closer look at the adverse event data. So the overall safety profile was pretty much what you'd expect from the GLP-1 class. GI side effects were the most common thing people reported. The really important part, though, is that no new safety signals popped up, and the rates of serious adverse events were basically the same across all the groups, even the placebo group. But here's where we start to see an interesting difference. When you look at GI side effects like nausea, the rates were actually very similar between the high dose and the standard dose. But one side effect did stand out: dysesthesia. That's an unusual sensation, like burning or tingling, and it was clearly more common with the higher 7.2 milligram dose. And this chart just drives that point home. You can see dysesthesia was almost exclusively a thing in the 7.2 milligram group. But, and this is really important context, most of these cases were mild, and over 84% of them actually went away while the participants were still on the drug.
Okay, we've covered the why, the how, and the what. Let's boil all this data down into the key things you need to know for clinical practice.
So what is the bottom line here? For patients with both obesity and type 2 diabetes, the 7.2 milligram dose of semaglutide delivers superior results for both weight loss and blood sugar control compared to the standard dose. And it does this with a predictable safety profile, with that one notable exception of an increase in mostly transient dysesthesia.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. You've got this really powerful dual efficacy on one side and this distinct safety profile on the other. So the big question is, for which of your patients who are managing both type 2 diabetes and obesity will this higher dose with its unique benefit-risk profile be the right choice?